to the Lions of Liberty podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Neighborhood Watch in Mr. Johnson's Libertyhood, where we examine the comings and goings of Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson and his, as always, pictured, it's like the also pictured in every single picture, Bill Weld. Today, I'm going to be joined by a very special guest, but before I tell you who that is, I want to direct you to where you can find the show notes for this episode, which is 246. That could be lionsofliberty.com/246. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to a Libertarian podcast I think other people will also enjoy. That's the Remzo Republic. He's been on the show before. We like to give a little Libertarian love to other people that share our viewpoints and can banter about the ideas of liberty. Now then, who's coming to the Libertyhood, you might ask? Who's driving through this neighborhood where we occasionally throw rocks at people? Unlike Gary Johnson, we throw the rocks. It's none other than my good friend and Felony Friday's own John Odermatt. Hey, Odie.
What is up, Brian? I am ready to throw some rocks at Gary Johnson.
Excellent. I hope you sized them up. Like, do you go for like skipping stones, or do you go for the big, heavy, just like baseball size rocks?
I like to try to confuse him, so I like throw a couple pebbles. And he's like, "What is that? Is it raining? What's going on?" And then just a gigantic rock comes raining down.
It's like when you're trying to trick the guards in every single action movie, and you throw the pebble, and they turn the head to look, and then you sneak in the back door. Except with the rock, the back door is a giant rock you hit him with.
That's exactly what it is.
We're not condoning that, but if anybody's Secret Service listening, we're not saying to do that. So, on this episode of Mr. Johnson's Libertyhood, we're going to look at a lot of different topics, and I want to jump right into it. We're just jumping in just right into a hot tub, scalding heat. And that's going to start with the recent endorsements for Mr. Johnson from not one newspaper, but two newspapers, both the Winston-Salem Journal and the Richmond Times-Dispatch, who, if I'm being honest, they demanded that Gary be in the debates. They didn't really endorse him per se. It's more of like, hey, we're endorsing him because we feel he should be represented and libertarians should be represented in this upcoming debate. So, Odie, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is this a good thing? And does it even matter that these newspapers are throwing any support behind Gary?
Well, I think maybe a little bit of both, a little contradiction. So I think it's a good thing for sure. I mean, it's better than them saying Gary Johnson's a crazy person. It's good that they're saying they want his ideas in the debate, that they want a different viewpoint, a libertarian-ish viewpoint in the debate. So I think that's a good thing. But as I think everybody knows by now, newspapers are largely irrelevant. I mean, most people under the age of 40 or maybe 45 get their news from the internet or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever the hell they're looking at. So, I mean, in that way, I don't think it matters that much. It's better than them saying that he sucks. But yeah, I think it is a good thing.
Well, here's a question for you. One of the things that I've expressed before really pisses me off is in the way that things are polled. They call people up. They literally just call people on the phone to poll them, which means, as we've seen in breakdowns, like I think CNN's and other ones, they rarely reach millennials in polling at all. So could newspaper endorsements actually be the key to Gary Johnson getting 15%? Because the old people are still going to read the newspapers.
Actually, that is a pretty good point. I didn't think about that, right? Because the only people that read newspapers are old people. So
yeah, it's like we should put, etch it on some tombstones. So when they go to visit their relatives, they'll be like, oh, Gary Johnson. But, we want to make sure they don't think he's dead. So, yeah, I mean, think about that, because it really, like, I thought the same thing. I was like, who cares about newspapers? They do nothing. They impact nothing. But when you hear major media outlets reporting about it, that, and old people read newspapers in Winston-Salem, that's like, it just sounds like a place a lot of old people live. It's like an old cigarette brand. So
exactly. And also, I mean, you can't overlook the fact that his newspaper endorsements outnumber Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump is a mainstream. He's the Republican candidate for president, and the Libertarian candidate has more newspaper endorsements. That alone, even with the newspaper industry going downhill, that's pretty darn impressive.
Then what would you give it?
I would give it a Johnson.
Johnson! That's right. And I agree. I also give it a Johnson. Hard to argue against. We were trying to argue against it, but it is hard to argue against. So that's good. Gary, starting off on the right foot. I'll jump right to the next topic. And I think actually the last time I had you on the show, we were talking about Bill Weld and Gary Johnson. I believe it was you. Hope it might have been Rico. I don't know, I'm confusing you too, maybe. But Gary Johnson was asked about who he would name to the Supreme Court, and he basically said, I let Bill Weld handle that side of things, which pissed me off to no end. And then Bill Weld threw out some crappy candidates. Was that you or was that Rico?
I think that was Rico. I remember listening to that one, and I don't remember commenting on it. So
Apologies, my friend. Well,
confusing me with Rico. That's terrible.
It's awful. He doesn't have a baby, not a small baby.
He's a large baby.
He is a large baby. Here's what happened recently then. So Gary Johnson was asked about the Supreme Court once more. And thankfully, Bill Weld wasn't there to steal his thunder. And he actually had an interesting answer. What he essentially said was that he was going to let Kelo really stand out as a possible litmus test for Supreme Court nominees in his presidency. Now, for those who don't know, the Kelo verdict, or the Kelo ruling, was essentially a ruling for eminent domain, which, as we all could say, it really pisses us off. So, and at this stage, in this case as well, it was, they were taking away people's houses to give to private parties to promote quote unquote economic development. And if you look at Kelo right now, it's literally a giant lot. People are kicked off their land. It's just a giant lot that is filled with feral cats. And I'll link to that in the show notes. So
you're gonna link to a giant lot just full of feral cats just roaming around.
You're gonna be able to pet the feral cats and catch feline AIDS from them just by reaching through your screen. That's where we've gone as a technology. So what do you think about that? I mean, is Kelo a good starting point? Is it enough just to point to Kelo, or should we hear more about what Gary's looking for in a Supreme Court nominee?
Well, I think that is actually pretty good. I mean, at first when I read this, I was like, it's kind of an odd answer. I wish he was, gave a more, it's really a really specific answer. And I wish that he kind of gave more of a general, more libertarian view across the board.
Yeah, because people are going to have to, I had to Google it, I'll be honest. And I was like, what? I pulled a Gary Johnson Aleppo. I was like, the what? But yeah, exactly.
It kind of sounds like he had just been reading about the case before the interview. Yeah. And then they asked him the question. He was like, "Oh yeah, Kelo. Yeah, that's a good one. I was just reading about that." And I think if someone agrees with Kelo, then yeah, they shouldn't be a Supreme Court judge.
That's maybe as Bill Weld off screen with a flashcard, or I don't know about you. You should start watching the show, Odie, even though you don't watch any television shows ever. Since you have a small girl, I've been watching the new season of Toddlers and Tiaras. I'll admit it. I don't even care. It's freaking hilarious. But you have all these moms coaching them from behind the stage, telling them to blow kisses and make little hearts and faces. So I'm wondering if Bill Weld Kelo'd him.
Yeah, that I'm not watching that show.
You should.
I only watch HGTV and Food Network. So
I invite all of our forum members and listeners to post Toddlers and Tiaras memes because I love it. It's so funny. So anyway, continue what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. It's not specific, or it's not broad enough. It's very specific. People are not going to have any idea what he's talking about. That being said, it is a really good example. I mean, it's something that it's so outrageous. It infringes on personal liberty, private property. And it's just, what's more egregious of a government overstep than forcing somebody off of their own private purchased land in order to give it to another private company for a dubious use, which might never happen except for the benefit of feral cats.
Well, in the case of Kelo, right, it was for government use, maybe a private company, but it was for this government subsidized housing, right? So it wasn't even for, not that I would be in favor of this for a pipeline or something like that, or a baseball stadium or a casino, or all the other reasons we're familiar with for them using eminent domain. But yeah, I think just to get down to the core of it, I think it is a good thing. I'm glad Gary Johnson is on the same page with us here and agrees with us that this is terrible, that the Kelo ruling is bad. But I wish he was just more clear. It seems like Gary, it's like that Rand Paul thing, one sentence earlier.
Rand Paul, one sentence earlier.
It's like one more sentence, Gary. I don't know, about something else would have been better here. I don't know.
One more sentence, Gary J. It's not as catchy, but
But I'll give this one. Okay, you know what? I'll give it a Johnson.
Oh, you're taking a page out of Ryan Stout's book.
Yeah,
Stout comes on one show. He comes on one show and he fucks up my whole system. Thanks a lot, Ryan. He was on. I'll link to that. He was on the last Mr. Johnson Libertyhood. Okay, so that's a Johnson from Odie. I will give it a Johnson because I think even though admittedly it's very obscure and he needs to explain it more, I really like that he brought it up. And I can rarely say that about Gary Johnson. So good job on that one, Gary. All right. How about I mentioned Aleppo and how I Aleppo'd on Kelo. Let's talk Aleppo because it's all anybody's talking about right now. Obviously, Gary Johnson had a faux pas in the questioning that was brought up by, I believe it was a CNN program. I'll link to a video on that as well. But he was asked basically, what would you do about Aleppo if you were elected? Gary Johnson's response, of course, was, what is Aleppo? So the question is, number one, should he have known exactly what Aleppo was? Number two, should he have answered the question in the manner he answered it? And then we'll talk about his response after the fact in a minute and also the social media response. So, Odie, what do you think? I mean, if you were in his shoes, how would you have handled the situation? Or how would you have liked to seen him handle this situation?
Well, I'll say first how I would have handled it and then how I would have liked to. I would have handled it the same way as Gary did because I had no idea what the heck Aleppo was. So, I mean, I can't fault him just as a human being not knowing what Aleppo is. But as a presidential candidate, I think you do have to be on top of it enough to know when somebody mentions the name of a city in a country where, you know, there's a huge crisis in Syria, where there's, you know, civil war and all kinds of, you know, people flee in there. There's the whole refugee crisis has originated mostly from Aleppo. So from that perspective, you know, yeah, a presidential candidate's got to know that stuff. But was 5 a.m. in the morning. You know, it's kind of it was an odd way to ask the question. I forget exactly what it said, but I think the guy said like, "So, what would you do about Aleppo?"
Yeah,
it's an odd way to ask.
It wasn't even in the context of Syria. I don't believe it was like the first question on getting to the topic of Syria without any sort of context.
Yeah, it was strange. It was almost like they were intentionally trying to get him there. I'm not sure if that's a conspiracy, but it seemed like it to me.
I agree. It did seem like a gotcha question to me as well. And even though with Hillary Clinton's obvious ties to Syria, I wonder if she would have answered that question. We know, I can say definitively, Donald Trump would not have known what to say. As much as he could say, oh, blah, 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 I should have known it. He would not have known what Aleppo was either. I mean, you and
he would have said something like, "Oh, you got a stupid face."
Aleppo, I love that dog food. No, but I mean, you're right though. I didn't know what Aleppo was. I had to look it up, and I consider myself pretty well versed as far as, especially with what's going on in foreign policy, because it's a passionate point for me and for all of us. I didn't know what Aleppo was. I've never heard in my life somebody reference Aleppo that I can recall until right now. But I do agree with you. I'm not Gary Johnson. I'm not running for president. I'm not somebody that goes on television and should be well versed exactly what's going on in a place like Syria, where the U.S. is involved, where there's all sorts of conflict going on, and there is a refugee crisis. So with that being said, it's hard and inescapable to give him anything but a Johns off. Do you agree?
I got to agree with you here. I mean, it's not, I don't think anyone, and if anyone is deciding who they're voting for based on this Aleppo gaffe, then, I don't know what's wrong with him. If they want somebody who knows the name of every, city that the United States government is bombing, then just vote for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. But you got to give Gary Johnson a Johns off for this one.
Yeah. Now, his response, I did like, though. And it was basically this is the statement he had put out, and it was linked to it on Facebook, etc., which is good because everybody was talking about it on Facebook. I'm just going to read a short excerpt from it. This morning, I began. Should I do the voice? No. This morning, I began my day by setting aside any doubt that I'm human. Yes, I understand the dynamics of the Syrian conflict. I talk about them every day, but hit with, quote, what about Aleppo, unquote, I immediately was thinking about an acronym, not the Syrian conflict. I blanked. It happens, and it will happen again during the course of this campaign. Can I name every city in Syria? No. Should I have identified Aleppo? Yes. Do I understand its significance? Yes. So now I wish he had not said it will happen again during the course of this campaign. That could have been left out. But overall, the sentiment of that statement I thought was pretty good. I mean, look, he is human, and he's pointing out the fact that, he's going to err. And I've given him credit before during this campaign for admitting, yes, I can make mistakes, and I will recognize and try to correct those mistakes, which is refreshing to hear.
Yeah, I think it was a good statement. I mean, you got to give Gary Johnson credit. The one thing that he holds clearly above these other two candidates is he seems like a real person who is legitimately an honest human being, which is, I don't think Trump or Hillary can touch him on that. They're not close to him. So it was a refreshing statement, a good statement. I wish that he had talked more about foreign policy in it, and the reason why Aleppo is such an issue, and sort of pointed back at Hillary Clinton. But he didn't. But for what it was, I think it was a win, and I'll give it a Johnson.
All right, Johnson from Odie. I will reserve. It's interesting. Before I give it a grade, I want to talk about. I've seen a lot of articles actually saying how this could be a great thing for Gary Johnson because it had 8.1 million Facebook shares, and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have like 86 million a day, so it's still only 1/10. It's not even as much percent as he needs to get into the debate of Facebook mentions, but it did create the largest groundswell of conversation about Gary Johnson since he first announced his candidacy and started speaking out as a third party. So a lot of that, of course, is going to be really negative. But as you said, the fact that if somebody's going to say, well, I'm not voting for Gary Johnson now, they weren't going to vote for him anyway. And I like this statement. So, all right, Johnson. All right, you know what, guys? Before we continue, I want to take a quick break, and I want to throw it over to Mark, who's got a little mention from another friend of ours.
Hey guys, Mark Claire here to tell you about another great Libertarian podcast. This one brought to you by my friend Remzo W. Martinez with his new program, The Remzo Republic. Now, I have to admit, this show holds a special place in my heart because Remzo started listening to the Lions of Liberty podcast several years ago, and this program was a major influence on his beliefs and eventually helped inspire the launch of the Remzo Republic. He even had me on as his very first guest, but this is no amateur hour. Remzo has put together an extremely professional-sounding program, and I find his approach to interviews really refreshing. Remzo is a laid-back, funny dude who is a master at driving conversations forward, and he isn't obsessed with shoving dogma down everyone's throats. You can find the Remzo Republic on many platforms, including Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, TuneIn, and Google Play. So check out the Remzo Republic, the clash between punk rock and politics.
All right, guys, we're back in. The friend was Remzo again. I don't know what to tell you. Remzo's all over this podcast, man. He's painting
He's
this
a
podcast.
swell guy. You got to love Remzo.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Good dude, Remzo. So, next topic, John. I think you had actually. Oh no, you're going to bring up one in a minute. Let's talk just really quick because this is a fast one. I'm going to preface this, and everybody's going to know where I'm going when I say this. Ron Paul happened to always get a certain sector of the populace behind him, and a very important section of the populace who knows a lot about foreign policy. Who are they, Odie?
Racists. The military. The military.
Correct. Yes, exactly right. The military. People that are currently in the military and, of course, former military members, veterans, they are once again rallying behind the libertarian point of view and the libertarian cause. And I've never understood for the life of me why people don't see the significance of that. That people have actually been in armed conflict say, no, we shouldn't go with this nutball or that nutball. Because libertarians actually know what they're talking about. We need to pull back from this because all we're doing is creating more war and more blowback every time. So anything to add on that? Like I said, this will be a quickie.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, you have Hillary Clinton, who is the devil and will probably start at least 3 more wars. And you have Donald Trump, who has said that he wants to bomb the shit out of ISIS, which, I mean, maybe if that's done precisely, could be a good thing. But if it's just raining down bombs across the Middle East, can't get behind that. So, of course, people in the military don't want to be put in a terrible position. So they go with the one person who seems the most sane. So I'll give it a Johnson.
Johnson is right. And I love how you called Hillary the devil, but I mean, if her health keeps declining, we may find out. If she suddenly leans her head back and a cloud of black smoke comes out of it, we're going to know that she was actually the devil.
Well, Bill recently referred to her as a demon. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
He said she works like a demon. Like, that's a direct quote.
So that actually makes a lot of sense because she seems to continuously take joy in flaying people and torturing individual people across the globe. So that makes a lot of sense that she works like a demon. Works as a demon. We're going to go a step farther.
Yeah.
All right, Odie, your turn here. So
the one here, and I think I actually posted this in the good old Lions of Liberty forum. If you guys aren't members, you can check out the Lions of Liberty forum on Facebook by typing Lions of Liberty forum in the search bar and joining. And we'll approve you as long as you look like you are libertarian and you look like a normal person. So try that out. So I posted this article about the one, the only Arnold Schwarzenegger saying that Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party needs to be in the debates. We need to hear from their view. It wasn't a full-out endorsement of Gary Johnson, but he was saying Gary Johnson needs to be in the debates. And all I got to say to that is, get to the chopper!
Get to the chopper! Yes! Man, I love Schwarzenegger stepping out and saying something. And I love that this follows a series of other celebrities, some are outwardly endorsing Johnson, like Larry the Cable Guy, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Melissa Joan Hart. And of course, Mitt Romney stepping up and saying, hey, I want them to be in the debates. And I know that's a topic that you found particularly interesting is Romney's support. And there's a conspiracy theory. Well, not conspiracy theory, but you have a sneaking suspicion something's coming down the road with him as well, right?
Yeah. For those that have been following our podcast here, you might have heard on our last little Libertarian roundtable that I've had Mitt Romney's phone tapped, just waiting for the moment when I know he's going to endorse Gary Johnson. And I can tell you, it's coming very soon. I would say within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to hear a Gary Johnson endorsement from Mitt Romney.
Wow, bold prediction. I like it. Everybody write that down. Put it in your calendars. 2 to 3 weeks, Mitt Romney. I believe it'll happen. I believe in you, John. And I can't wait to give it what this is also going to get, a Johnson!
Yeah, I'll definitely give the Schwarzenegger thing calling to get Gary in the debates a Johnson. But I'll wait to give. Can we wait to score the Mitt Romney one for another day because it's sort of a complicated issue.
All right, we can wait on that. All right, so let's move on then to the place that we all dread. I think I'm more afraid of where we're going to go now than I am of going to Syria, if I'm being perfectly honest. But either way, we got to go there. Yes, we're going into the Mind Weld. This week's Mind Weld. I'm not going to lie. It's not all bad. It's all drawn from one article, though. One piece, because I was trying to find more Bill Weld news. But to be honest, he's been a little bit quiet as of late. But he did do an interview with Marketwatch.com. This is a popular website for people that are financially inclined, but they've kind of branched out to other things. And this one actually was posted in our forum and drew my attention by our forum member, Jacob Lindsay. Hi, Jacob. Thanks a lot for contributing to the site. And it basically focuses on a lot of different issues, but there's a few I wanted to key on. The very first of which ties into Aleppo, because how could you not talk about Aleppo? Of course, if Bill Weld goes out there, people are going to be like, what did you think of Gary effing up? So here's what he had to say. He's been saying, this is Bill talking about Gary. He's been saying for months that it's a mess because we armed the rebels. The rebels lost their arms and they wound up in the hands of ISIS. Gary, as a libertarian, is somewhat less inclined towards regime change, military strikes than, for example, Secretary Clinton is. That's a legitimate position. And I think it's the reason why Gary polls number one among military personnel, both active and retired and their families, because military personnel understand the costs of wars. We've been at war in one place or the other in the world for almost 40 years. So that's something that Gary and I are inclined to take a dim view of. I think many people, if not most people, agree with that. What do you think about that statement?
Well, I think it's a really interesting statement for a couple reasons. One thing, I wish that Gary could say this himself and articulate it this way. I think Bill Weld did a great job articulating Gary's position for him. And I think the most interesting part is Bill Weld actually points out a difference between Hillary Clinton, who he has sort of praised before and had kind words for and called her an old friend, or called her a good kid, I think was what he called her. So it was interesting to see that, Bill Weld pointed out that Hillary Clinton has a little more aggressive foreign policy than Gary Johnson. So that was good to see.
Yeah, this is the first time I can actually remember Bill Weld ever even saying anything slightly inconsiderate towards Hillary Clinton. So yeah, it was great to see. And you know what? Very coherent. And I hate to say it, Bill Weld, even though we don't agree with him, does tend to explain positions better. Now, whether or not we agree with those positions and how he's saying them is up for debate, but he tends to express himself more clearly. And I think he did a pretty good job of explaining how these things happen, why regime change is bad, how the arms are ending up coming back to haunt us, and, and defending Gary and just saying he knows what he's talking about. So,
which is a bit surprising that he can explain things so well, considering he drinks a fifth of Jim Beam every night. But
well, that's what he puts his head in the freezer for. What do you think? Kind of wakes him up, chills him out. I don't know if you've ever been ice fishing, but you could drink about 45, 50 beers easily. It's that cold.
I might have to try it.
There you go. You should try it. It's fucking fun. All right. So what would you give this? What would you give Weld here?
I got to give Bill Weld. I think it's the first time I've ever done this before. I got to give him a Johnson.
I agree, Johnson, as I fight back the bile in my throat, as I'd say it. It is hard. It's like, oh, God, I got to give Bill Weld a Johnson, really? But you know what? Hey, maybe he's learning. Maybe he's getting better at faking it, I should say. All right, so another one coming from the same piece. Bill Weld was asked about closing bases, and it actually all started from reining in the budget is how this question got brought up. And it got turned to the fact that Bill Weld mentioned the dubious figure that the Pentagon says 20% of bases can be closed. Now, I basically talked about that with Rico in another episode and debunked that figure. It's not accurate. What they said is that there's 20% of basically extra room. That doesn't mean 20% of bases can be closed. Still, it is waste. But Bill then went on to talk about a base named Fort Devens that was closed while he was in office. He oversaw that and he was in office during it. And then it was turned into an economic development area called, I think like the Devon, I don't know, something like that, economic division. So what happened though is that he's touting this thing and you say on the surface, you say, oh, that's great. Okay. A government base is being closed down and turned into something that can be used by the citizens. Ostensibly you'd think, oh, the land is being sold off to private citizens or private companies, and then they can use it to the benefit of the town. What really happened, though, as I looked into it, is that Bill Weld actually took over the land on a state level. Now, this was agreed to under pressure, essentially, by the three towns that surrounded it. And how that came to be was that, every time a base closes, typically what happens is that the area goes into an economic depression because all these people's jobs plus supporting the troops and, feeding them and providing all this other crap that they're going to buy when they're around, that goes tits up. So these people said, okay, we're in. And they made this deal essentially to say, okay, we're going to allow you to develop this thing, but we have to be involved in all the decision making X, Y, Z. And they had all these conditions. What ended up happening was that this development area did okay, but there were a lot of things, like a lot of different companies that the towns did not want to come in there that were, pollutants. There were different, manufacturing entities, and the townspeople basically got the short shrift, and they're passing through all of these things very quickly before the towns had any say in them. So what do you think about that, Odie? If you were able to follow my rambling.
Yeah, no, it made good sense, and it's it's not surprising. This happened when Bill Weld was governor, right, of Massachusetts.
Correct. That's correct.
So Bill Weld, a bit of a crony, has a crony streak, and I think this reeks of crony capitalism. Taking the base from the military, and essentially it's not going to private parties. It wasn't going to the highest bidder. It probably was not ever even for sale. It probably just transferred to hand-picked companies or hand-picked corporations to take over, and then they just ran stuff by and put the pollutants or whatever, the companies that pollute, changed regulations, got the proper permitting in place in order to go around anyone who would object in the local community. So it's really, I think at the core of it, it's tragedy of the commons. You have a public area that was a military base, and now a public area that is being abused and used as a stimulant for crony capitalism. So it's no good. There's really nothing good about this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things where some people will point at it and say, well, the ends justify the means, because the actual area, the Fort Devens little base area itself, the companies that are based there are doing well. But again, this is to the detriment of the towns around it who are not benefiting as promised, who do not have a say as they were promised. And yeah, as you said, it's crony capitalism, and Bill Weld saying, oh, well, I did this great thing. No, you didn't do a great thing, because you're taking government and you're overstepping it and you're buying this property up. So John's off.
I would agree. John's off.
Good. Now, one more we're going to talk about, just to wrap it up. So towards the end of this, they were talking about taxation, and Bill Weld said, yes, we'd like to eliminate the IRS, although he later then kind of went back on that, as he likes to do. But he did have a quote, which I enjoyed, and again, which our forum friend pointed out specifically, good old Jacob, and that is this. Quote, I sometimes say taxation is theft because it is coercive. It's theft by the government from the people as far as it goes. Obviously, you need some level of taxation, but I think anything that brings the level of taxation down is a good thing. So what to make of that statement? What's your take on that?
Well, to simplify that statement, he's saying, obviously, taxation is coercion, but obviously you need some coercion to have a civil society. So I don't know. It doesn't make any freaking sense. I guess he doesn't think people can work together and the market can work in a free way. So apparently not.
Yeah, it is. And he did this a couple times in this interview on this topic, where he's like, no, we're against it, but we're kind of for it. It's like in a couple weeks ago, he had this quote where he said, any taxation over 33% is criminal. And it's like, so you're fine with it up to 33%? Like what?
32.5%.
32.5%. Yeah. So what would you give it then? What's your grade?
This is a John's off. It's got to be big time.
John's off is right. He started off, when you hear somebody say taxation is theft and talk about coercive government, you want to be like, oh, yeah, got my Liberty Bone on. But, man, yeah, John's off. He just erased all the good that was done. It
really just kills the mood.
It really does. Blow out the candles, turn off the Kenny G. So that'll do it, Odie. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for listening to our latest issue of Mr. Johnson's Libertyhood. And I will be including the full song at the end. I had a request to play the full impression of me singing in Mr. Rogers' voice as Gary Johnson. It's a double impression.
Can't wait to hear that. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, always good to have you. And guys, make sure you check out Felony Friday. That is every Friday on Lions of Liberty. Odie, where can they find the archives for Felony Friday?
Well, you can find the archives at lionsofliberty.com/Felony Friday. We've had some technical difficulties that were getting worked out, but they should be back up. It should be back up soon, hopefully.
Yeah, it'll all be fine. It'll all be great.
It'll be fine. It'll work out. Just go to the link. Go to
the link. It'll be all good. All right, guys, that's going to wrap our show. Odie, thanks again, and let's let Mark take us home.
Live long and live free.
It's a beautiful day in this Libertyhood, a beautiful day for a candidate. Would he be mine? Could he be mine? It's a Liberty day in this Johnsonwood, a Liberty-ish day for a Gary. Would he be mine? Could he be mine? I've never wanted to have a candidate just like you. I've always wanted to have a real libertarian who's schooled. But let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would he be mine? Could he be mine? As long as he acts libertarian. Won't you please, won't you please, please won't you be a principled libertarian?